Hi, everyone, and welcome to another Talking Some episode that I'm really excited about. Welcome, Néma.
Hi, thank you.
Did I say it correctly?
Yes, you did.
Very, very well. All right, so for anyone here who doesn't know Néma, which I'm sure is pretty much everyone, you were my client in BedTyme, and that was quite a while ago. I would say it was maybe a year ago or something like that. But super glad you're here. And was it that long, or how long ago was it?
Yeah, that's right. It was about a year ago.
Right? That's
Yeah,
kind of what I remember.
summer, I think I remember taking it, starting your course.
Yes. And it was super nice working with you. And then what happened was a friend of yours had some trouble sleeping, and you sent me an email. And then, of course,
Mm.
I took the opportunity to say, "Hey, you want to be a guest on the podcast?" So here we are. So thanks for being here. And I'd like to actually. I've started starting all these episodes with the question of like how did you first come in touch with me and my work, etc.
Yeah, so I had, ooh, I mean, at first, I think when I started having sleep difficulties, I really was confused and didn't understand what was going on. And so I had gone to a number of different websites and also tried connecting with my doctor at the time. So actually, I was in school doing my master's, and so I was also thinking maybe there's something correlated with that, but I wasn't sure. So I tried to get into. I got into the clinic to talk to one of the doctors on campus, but basically was told this has to be going on for at least 3 months before we can refer you to
Okay.
anybody.
Yeah.
And then by the time I was, you know, I think 6 months in, I finally went to see them, but they did weren't able to refer me to a clinic because of the wait times to go there, and this would have been a sleep clinic. And then so I thought, "Okay, well, maybe there's something available online." So I was just looking at different options, and then that's when I saw the whole, I think, very prescriptive treatment of insomnia where you calculate your sleep efficiency, but first you keep a diary to look at how you're sleeping over 2 weeks. And so I did that, and obviously it was basically telling me what I knew, it's not good, but it was nice sort of seeing the insight into the trends because my biggest problem was I was waking up in the middle of the night and couldn't go back to sleep. And then tried the whole, oh, what was it, like bedtime restriction and tracking it to see if that helped, as well as trying to do some of the relaxation during the day, but that wasn't getting any better, so then I just was kinda going, "What else is out there?" and eventually stumbled into, your resources, so
So glad you found it. And I mean, it was a while ago, so you may not remember, but it's just for my curiosity. Do you think did you find the YouTube channel first, or did you find like the website, or what did you find?
I actually found your podcast
Oh,
first.
okay, got it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, 'cause it was one of your, I think, colleagues that I had found out, and I
Martin Reed, probably.
yes, Martin Reed,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, so I've started listening to his stuff, and I found a lot of his stuff was really good, and then, um, I can't remember if maybe you were on one of his programs or something, but I came through you through him.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. All right. Thanks for sharing that. And so we know a little context. Now going back to like your story. So
Mhm.
you were in college doing your master's, and was it the stress of that triggered everything, or how did everything start?
Yeah, so during my master's, like, when I first started it, everything was fine. I think the biggest trigger for me was more I was just in a relationship that probably wasn't the best relationship for me because I noticed that I started, seeing this person during my first year of my master's, and then I noticed as things started to progress, my sleep started to get worse and worse and worse. And then we ended it, and that's when my sleep started getting better. It almost resolved right away. And then we had been on a break for a while and then started seeing each other again, but it was as soon as we started seeing each other again, my sleep started getting worse. And then when that finally ended for good. By then it was persistent, and I was just having really bad nights, and it wasn't resolving. And then that's when I started panicking a bit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's such a, and we'll talk about this more later. Like such a common variation of of the same story that we hear so many times. But just so the audience has an idea. Like at this point when this had ended, like your sleep
Mhm.
was like really choppy. And what was it like? Like was it you were mainly you were awake a lot at night? You had trouble staying asleep, or what was it? What happened? What was happening?
Yeah, so for the most part, I could fall asleep no problem. But I would get maybe, let's say, typically I would go to bed around 10:30, but then I'd wake up around 2:33 in the morning, and I just could not fall asleep. And so oftentimes I would just lie there trying to will myself to fall asleep, which didn't happen. And then so after a while, I started just getting out of bed and then saying, okay, well, maybe I'll just start my day earlier, go do other things. But I remember at that time being so concerned about the lack of sleep that I was getting, and especially all the potential dangers that were coming my way and health issues that I'd be facing if I didn't get this resolved, which obviously made me more stressed. And I think when I before this, when I was sleeping better, I had read a lot about sleep, but I think it was more sort of the sleep hygiene stuff. And then I remember listening to an interview with Matthew Walker, and it was a three-part series, and it was in promotion of the book, I think, Why We Sleep. And it was very compelling. And I remember thinking, oh my goodness, I didn't realize all these things could happen without sleep. And I remember sharing it with my family. And so when my sleep difficulties were starting, that's when my mind started thinking of that book and that interview and everything that was coming my way if I didn't get this resolved right away.
Absolutely. And I mean, I've to be honest with you, I was excited about that book when it came out because it was like a book about sleep, so much buzz about it, but I could not get past literally the first page because it
Mhm.
was like, oh my gosh, this is not true at all. This is just super scary. I've never read more than the first page, but even from the first page, I have a good idea of kind of what the things were you might be scared about. But do you
Yeah.
remember some of the things that you thought could happen if you didn't sleep?
Well, I think because there was a lot, and uh, from what I can recall, because I remember there was a segment on association of poor sleep with like risk of like all these like diabetes and obesity and all these chronic conditions, cancer, and then also in terms of your memory and performance. And for me, that was a big thing too, because during my master's, it was quite challenging. And I was already feeling like I was having a hard time concentrating and absorbing everything. And then so the idea that now this is going to be compounded and worse if I can't get my sleep under control because I won't be able to have proper memory consolidation and retrieve the information that I need to retrieve. And then thinking, it's going to make me more anxious. And so those were sort of the two big things. And then I think there was also information about like how much you should sleep. And then, like caffeine and how bad it, I don't think it was necessarily how bad caffeine is, but that how long it stays in your system, which I believe was longer than I think it actually does. And then also with alcohol, like how horrible alcohol is for your sleep. And so yeah, all that stuff too kind of then made me, and just for a little bit of background, like I'm in nutrition, I'm a dietitian, but even hearing those things was kind of going, because my expertise isn't in sleep and diet. So thinking, oh my goodness, like could possibly even just drinking a little bit of alcohol be impacting my ability to sleep at night? Like maybe I'm just super sensitive to it now that I have this condition. So
You know, I want to go back to some things, but now that you said that, I just remembered it. I was like, I remember we talking about that when we were working the app that you were a dietitian, and there's some specific thing that you had like some insight that was kind of like the way I talked was similar to something you had read that related to diet and nutrition. I don't know if you do you remember anything about that?
Oh, you know what? Um, I'm trying to recall exactly what we chatted about, but I wonder maybe in terms of like what really opened my eyes in regard to the content that you had on your platforms was just challenging those beliefs that you have. And especially when you think about there's been many times in the past you haven't had a good night's sleep, but you were still able to be productive, and there was times where you probably did have a great night's sleep and your day didn't work out as well as you did. Like maybe you didn't exercise as well as you could have, or you didn't do as well on a presentation, but there's been times where you didn't sleep and you've actually done really well in those areas. So I was also thinking about that in regard to food and nutrition.
Uh-huh,
Like
exactly.
how often, we're told, "Oh, we shouldn't eat this, we shouldn't eat that." But then when you think about the context of everything you're eating, really what matters is your dietary pattern over weeks and months as opposed to one day.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like, okay, so what if you ate like a
A
bag of
donut,
donuts
you know?
or a
Yeah,
couple of donuts, right? Like,
yeah.
I mean, if you're doing that every single day and the rest of your diet is horrible and you're not exercising, yeah, that's going to be a problem. But
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
in the context is everything else that you have to eat throughout the day to be healthy, there's no need to really worry about it.
Yeah, maybe it was exactly this. I just remember we had this conversation within the app about a topic that was kind of like a really aha moment for you and for me too. I was like, oh yeah, there's a interesting correlation there. But anyway, going back to where we were. So yeah, you'd read this book, and obviously like so much pressure and so many restrictions, so many ideas here,
Mm.
and now and now does this pattern where you say you fall asleep maybe 10:30, you wake up like 2 or something like that, and does that just like kind of keep going for many months, or does it kind of go up and down, or what's happening?
Okay, in terms of where I'm at right now.
Yeah. Oh
Yeah,
no, no, but back like when it
back
was
then.
happening. Yeah.
Yeah, so back then, I think my breaking point, I remember it clearly because so my sleep was pretty much fairly consistent in terms of the lack of sleep I was getting and the amount of sleep I was able to get. So, yes, that 10 going to bed around 10:30 around there, and then sleeping for 4 or 5 hours seemed to be fairly consistent and happening at least, like, probably 4 or 5 days a week. But then where I really started to get scared was when I noticed that I was sleeping less and less and less, and then having troubles falling asleep.
Ah,
And I think I went for maybe at least 3 or 4 days of just sleeping 2 hours and just feeling so tired during the day, but then becoming so anxious knowing that or believing that I'm going, "Oh my I don't know what to do." Like, I'm so tired, but I'll probably still only sleep 2 hours, and then finally not sleeping at all, and then just coming home and breaking down. And my sister was here, and she's going, "What's wrong?" And I'm going, "I think I lost the ability to sleep."
oh my gosh. And by the way, I just want to point at something out for anyone that's tuning in here. Like it's, I'm talking to you quite a long time after this unfolded. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I can sense so much that you can look back upon a lot of things that were super scary then, but now you can even smile at them because you understand kind of what happened and you understand so much more. Am I correct when I say this?
Yeah, definitely, because I think so much of what I learned from you was just how our minds can put us in these really wild places, and it's all based on our thoughts and not actually what's happening in reality or what we hear, and then we basically integrate it and saying, "Well, it must be true," and then believing it. And so what I actually now going through this am actually really grateful that I had gotten insomnia because I think it got me to a place mentally where I wouldn't have been able to get to before. And so much of the information that you provided, I feel is useful in so many other areas of life as well. So even let's say if I'm at work and I'm getting anxious about doing something that I don't really, maybe I'm not familiar with, and then instead of catastrophizing like all the negative things that could happen, which I normally might do, I can sit down and say, well, you know what, like Néma, none of this has actually happened yet. So you don't know how this is going to play out. And instead of sitting here and letting it ruminate, why don't you go talk to people and ask questions, and don't let this get the best of you. And you're still going to be fine, even if it doesn't work out the way that you want it to.
So I'm so glad to hear this because since I worked with you, like this has been on my mind so much more and more and more and more. The like how what we learn from the struggle with sleep can apply to like life in general. I'm so glad that you know you saw this even then when what I was teaching was not as as I think it's improved a lot since then. But anyway, that's
Mhm.
super nice to hear. And and now again, sort of like going back to your story. And by the way, really super quickly, again, for this is just for people that are tuning in here. The reason I pointed out what I pointed out is that people that hear this can get this idea that, oh no, Néma, she never had it as bad as I do now because she's smiling and she seems pretty happy. But that's what it can look like after a while. But clearly from what you're saying, I think anyone who hears this should understand that you were in a place that was really, really tricky. I mean, oh my gosh, when this like you slept less and less and less, then you didn't sleep at all. It must have been so scary. So that was kind of like a real, a moment you really remember. That was really scary. Breaking down, crying. Your sister was there,
Mhm.
and what happened after that?
Yeah, and to what you said, I mean, back then I can remember just thinking, I don't know if I'll ever get through this, because it wasn't only trying to deal with it, but going through what some sleep researchers were saying in regards to do the sleep restriction, get out of bed if you don't fall asleep after 30 minutes, stay out of bed, track to see if your sleep efficiency is improving over time. But doing that made me more obsessed with sleep and trying to get a good enough sleep, where I actually needed to not do that because I wasn't able to relax properly, because it was always in my subconscious. And then it was always this thing that was looming over my head, that if my sleep efficiency wasn't getting better, I wasn't getting better, and I was doomed to fail. So yeah, so I just remember going, okay, so I'm doing this. I can't get access to the resources that I need to get access to. And living here in Canada, where you have coverage for a lot of these things, you would I was a little bit naive thinking, okay, it's a referral, I'll have to wait a little bit. But then also knowing, now realizing that, well, maybe the first referral I get isn't going to be helpful. And this is more just from other friends that I've had who maybe have gone to sleep studies and they've just been told, "Oh, yes, you don't sleep well," which is what they knew already. But it was really kind of trying to understand, well, what's the etiology of this? And then looking at, I think, the work around the 3 Ps, and kind of realizing, oh, this is very much a mental issue, where nothing that I take, like consume diet wise, or there's no supplements, or doing things like making sure I'm in a dark space for several hours before I go to bed, or not having any blue light. Like those are things that I learned from you, where it's like, if you're really tired, you'll sleep through anything. Your sleep drive will be high enough that it will make you sleep. And that's when I realized, wow, like how powerful the mind is, where you can, and I'm going, okay, if I literally got myself mentally into this, so there's got to be a way out. And I realized there was a way out once I went through, and I listened to so many of your interviews, because I found it really, really, really helpful to hear other people's stories. And there was so many things in there that I could relate with. But it was also nice just having a health professional like yourself who has so much expertise in this area that wasn't giving a textbook approach and applying that to every single person. And where you even kind of went, oh yeah, I think you mentioned too that you were kind of doing the sleep restriction and stuff with your clients and then kind of went, hey, this isn't actually helping people. What's going on here? And then had the insight from there to go, oh, you know what? It's actually making people think more about their sleep. So, hey, how about if they're comfortable in their beds and they feel relaxed, helping them stay in bed. And then the whole focus, taking the focus away from trying to sleep and trying to relax. I found very, very, very helpful. And not where I'm like, oh, I have to try these relaxation exercise before noon because if I don't do them before noon, it's going to be too close to bed. I'm going to think about sleep, but just kind of re-examining everything that I was even doing to try to create a better sleep in the hopes of falling asleep as opposed to trying to relax. And I found once I started to implement that and then go through your course and get some of those strategies and tips, and I like that they were all spaced out. It wasn't all this information at once, so it was very easy to go through and it didn't take a lot of time. But it was something easy that I could implement and try right away.
Yeah, so glad hearing all this. And first thing I want to just briefly comment on is like exactly what you're saying, which is that there are many unfortunate states of affairs when it comes to sleep, and one of them is that what is like the gold standard, which is like so many sleep experts recommend CBT-I. It is problematic. Like some people do really well, but I think it's a kind of a lottery for me because those people who do well, they don't really understand why they did well. It was because they went in the direction of relaxing and taking it easy, but they don't quite fully understand it sometimes. So anyway, very tricky, but
Mhm.
hopefully this will change. And and I just wanted to say that. So it seemed like that sort of breakdown you had that led you to like I really got to do something, and that eventually led you to finding my work, finding the app, and we have seen like you shared some of the things that really made a difference. And now when you started using BedTyme, the app, for most people it's still kind of a bumpy stretch. Like the first time is it's not like everything just kind of gets better immediately, even if you start really understanding things. But what was that sort of like the path towards kind of leaving insomnia like? What was the path like? Was it very bumpy or not so bumpy, or what was it like?
Yeah, because I feel my path started in terms of me searching for answers when the sleep problems were happening. So I almost feel like I had to go through all that stuff, or at least those were the only resources that I knew of at that time. And so then when I finally got onto the app, I had listened to so many of your interviews that I kind of was really, I think I knew what it was going to be about without knowing all the details. So, because of that, I think I just felt like, oh, this is all the information that I've gotten from Daniel has been so helpful. And just like looking into the app before trying it and saying, you know what, like I really think logically that this is a very good program for me to implement because it will help me stay on track every day. Uh, as opposed to kind of knowing these are the things that I should be doing, but getting caught up in other things. And at that time too, when I started your app, I had quite a bit of different like jobs happening, and it was still during COVID. So yeah, so when I started your app, even though the beginning, that I think you do the 2 weeks education, so a lot of that I remember hearing, but it was really good to hear it all again. And then, because I think a lot of the stuff I was reading too, I don't know if I truly understood it as well as I could. So then once I went through your app and started going through the modules is where I'm going, oh, okay, like because I felt more confident in being able to feeling confident because I'm going, okay, now I feel like I have something from someone who's used this with a lot of different people and is also talking openly about, with their clients, what's working and not working. And then being able to chat with you and I think your partner on there as well. It was nice because I'm going, okay, even if there is a roadblock, I have someone that I can reach out to who knows what they're talking about. And I'm not going to be given the same advice that everyone else is given.
Absolutely. And that happens often, by the way, like someone who has spent quite a lot of time on the YouTube channel actually has learned a lot. And I mean, you can start a program like BedTyme or like our immunity program at any point, but of
Mhm.
course, it is easier if you already done a lot of learning. But it's also, like you said, it's kind of like, I like I used to skate, like, like when as a kid, like growing up in Sweden, we used to everybody had to skate, and then I took some skating lessons here, and I was kind of like, I already know it. I should start at least intermediate level, but there was no choice. Everybody has to start a beginner, and it was really good because you the fundamentals were really good, and it's a little bit the same with the app. Like you know quite a bit, but it's good to start from A to B to C. It can be helpful like that. But in
Yeah.
terms of like did you find that when you started working in the app, you already had started sleeping better? You were less worried about things, or how did that kind of process of starting to see things happen a little easier sleep-wise? What was that like?
Yeah, I think once I started listening to your shows that I was sort of um my sleep was slightly getting better, but not to the degree that I was hoping it to be. And I think I was coming from a place too of going, all right, I'm going to go back to sleeping a full night's sleep, knowing, okay, I guess 7 to 8 hours is not as normal as we think it is, but still looking for that. I need to feel rested. I still really want to sleep right away. And just like how hard it is to get out of that mindset. And so taking your app really made me force me to go, if you don't sleep, it's okay. If you don't sleep, it's okay. What are all these other things that you can do? Um, and not focusing so much on the sleep, but focusing on my abilities in other areas.
Absolutely.
Uh, and it was actually, and I don't know if other people go through this too, but I also felt like it's very difficult talking to people about it who don't have it. And I get why, because, especially if they're sleeping well, it just seems like something that you should be able to do, and there's a quick fix out there. Um, but and that's where I found too, it wasn't helpful for me to talk to many people about it, even family members, just because actually wasn't helping me. It was making it worse, and it was more of a, well, like, I don't understand why you can't sleep, and then associating certain qualities of mine with not sleep, like you're focusing too much on your health, like I probably do, and a lot of that is probably part of my profession because health is very important to me, and it's something that I think everyone should be living with vitality. So, but it wasn't good to be talking to family members about it or friends. So this is where I found here it was almost listening to other people's stories. I felt like I was part of a community and going, all right, so I'm not alone, but there's a way out.
Yeah, no, I'm so glad you bring this up. And absolutely, this is a common experience you have. Like I usually tell people exactly that, almost every problem we have in life, it's great to talk to family and friends, but when sleep is a little different because oftentimes people will just be like, what do you mean? Like what?
Mhm.
And just that reaction alone can make you feel like, oh, something's really wrong because this person like completely doesn't understand me, and people send you in all kinds of directions. Try this, try that. So
And
very,
especially now with CBT.
yeah, for sure.
It's just so funny, and I mean, like how many times I hear, "Oh, we'll just take CBD, just try a little bit of CBD."
Is
And
that, by the way, is that legal now in Canada? Or?
yeah,
Yeah, okay. Same here in Oregon. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And now, uh, yeah, there was something I wanted to ask you about specifically because, like, you coming on as a guest is a little sort of unique because most guests I have, they worked with me like 2 months ago or like fairly recently. But now, thanks to you being willing to come on here, we have like the perspective of someone who, it's been a while. So I would be really interested to hear about like I believe, if I just remember correctly, that we worked maybe like 2 months or 3 months or something like that in the app, right?
yeah, yeah.
And then you graduated and like take us from then to now. What how are things been like? Do you have speed bumps, or you slept okay, or you don't really you aren't bothered if you don't, or what's happening, or what's
Yeah,
been happening?
so I do have speed bumps, um, but overall much better than where I was before. It's really just, the way I think about sleep is much different. So now I'm kinda like, there has definitely been many nights where I hardly slept after taking the app, but it just wasn't happening nearly as often, and when it did, I it was because something was going on and my mind was just not able to quiet itself down. Um, and so this is where I was going, you know what, if it gets bad enough, I always have the app that I can go back onto. Uh, but it's okay because I found that, often what will happen, it will be a couple nights and then I'll be fine again. So it's really just working through calming my mind. Um, but it's something that probably had to happen because my mind is often racing. And so this now has just given me a tool that I can use.
So glad to hear this. And I want to sort of like for anyone that's kind of listening and maybe skipped half of the episode and just jumped in here. I just want to highlight again what you said earlier, which was that um, the struggle with insomnia has taught you so many things that you otherwise wouldn't have learned. That actually has been helpful in so many other areas of life. And I'm sure sleep wise things are gonna just get easier or stay like they are now, and which you're not bothered by. So that's all fantastic. And now I have to ask you this one because I know everybody listening is they're gonna be thinking about this like so hard. Is like, how do you quiet your mind? How do you do that? Like what do you answer to that one?
Oh, yeah, so I what I find really helpful is just even doing different meditation practices too. And so I try to do at least 10 minutes a day. And really like anywhere. So I'm not someone that, oh, I have to sit in a corner and be really quiet and think about shutting my brain off. But a lot of the practice that I do is, recognizing experience itself. And instead of trying to shut off my what I'm thinking about, but just constantly bringing myself back to the moment that I'm in and paying attention to my thoughts as opposed to getting caught up in them.
Exactly.
And so I find doing that practice every day helpful. And a lot of this is because I'm just going, how do you really understand your mind unless you start until you start learning it and paying more attention to it and paying attention even to your reactions. So I find having implemented that along with what we did very useful as well.
I'm so glad I asked that because like what you said is it's just music to my ears. I believe in that like 100%, and I do the exact same thing by the way. Like I typically in the morning I try to like sit for just 15 minutes and exactly just observe what's happening and my reaction to what I think and everything that's going on around me, just being present. And I mean, what can be so confusing is that so many people uh, arrive at meditation as a kind of like a fix, as in like, well,
Mm.
I'm going to use this to make my mind go quiet. In which case, of course, when we try to make ourselves not think, then it just becomes this, we think more and we become more anxious, etc. But what you're describing is exactly how I think of it too. It's somewhat the opposite. It's actually like when you allow the mind to like do all the racing thoughts, like, yes, I'm going to listen to it, be present with them. Then it's kind of like the signal is heard by us, and the mind is kind of like, it doesn't need to send us that signal so much. That's how I think about it. But does it resonate with you?
Oh, it definitely does. Yeah, I sort of see it as being like proactive to almost prepare yourself for bigger situations or problems that are going to arise, because they think realistically there are probably going to be other things that we all are going to experience that are not going to be pleasant. They're going to be very negative, but these are just tools that we can add to help us deal with those so that we're better prepared, and they don't take us so much by surprise. It's almost like, you know, a business doing a whole risk mitigation strategy. This is kind of like what we can do for ourselves with our minds, and it's so much easier to do when you're in a good place as
Yeah.
opposed to trying to implement it when you're feeling horrible.
Yeah,
I'm not saying that you can't do it then,
exactly. Right.
but those feelings can just be so strong, and I just know there's been times where I was just feeling so down and sad and, almost feeling like I was depressed, and it was so hard to get out of that where now I'm going, "Oh, okay," like, because I've been training to become more aware of those feelings and where they're coming from and how those feelings feel, that it's been easier to recognize them when they start coming, and then going, "Okay, like, I recognize that, but I have a choice." And then even when I am feeling really sad, going, "Yes, but you," like, by paying closer attention to my feelings and where they're resonating in my body and what my mind's doing, it's easier for me to then remember what feeling happy is like when I'm really sad. And going, "You know what? Yes, you're feeling this way, but you will feel happy." And sometimes it's a matter of like hearing a great song or, seeing like people laughing and smiling or having a really beautiful interaction with a stranger, where it's kind of helpful to go, "Okay, you don't again need to catastrophize about this." So yeah, I find that's where meditation's also been very useful for me.
Absolutely. And you bring up, so it's such a good point about how, like, I teach these things like so often, like how you know, when you're awake at night, try to not make it like a foe or an enemy that you try to defeat, but like befriend wakefulness, do something you like to do. Or when you have a strong emotion, discomfortable, like uncomfortable emotion, you can just be with it, observe it. And as you said, that is so much easier when you are in a pretty okay place. But it is, and I just say, and now somebody who's like really struggling right now would say like, so what he's saying, it's harder for me. I think it is harder for you, but knowing that yes, it is harder to be present for strong emotions when you are in some struggle, that I think oddly can make it easier, because then you're not so hard on yourself for
Mhm.
finding it a little bit more difficult, and then it gets easier from then on. But does that make sense to you, Emma?
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and I think it also goes to show, like, humans are meant to have a range of emotions. Like, I don't know if it'd actually be good for us to be feeling elated all the time, or if we could even feel that way if we never went through some dark periods from time to time, so
Absolutely. And let me throw this one in, just to see what you think of this one, which is, I think of it like almost that there's a confusion often in culture about like happiness and sort of peace of mind, meaning that happiness I think of as something we feel like when we see something, like you said, we hear a nice song, you feel kind of a happy sensation and you feel excited, but it's not necessarily normal to feel that way all the time. It is also just kind of an emotion that comes and goes. But then if we don't have any strong emotions, we're not very happy, we're not very sad, we're not very anxious, we can be sort of, that's like peace of mind. We have peace of mind when we don't feel any type of strong emotion, which is actually very pleasant. But do you recognize that? Do you resonate with that?
Yeah, yeah, and I think, and that's actually something that would be good for me to pay more attention to as well, that idea of peace of mind, even when you're doing something that might be really boring
Yeah.
or not that exciting, or when you're not having those joyful feelings, that you can still be quite content.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, and I think also in a way, it's almost made me appreciate when I start feeling really good and kind of going, you know what, like, I really want to like enjoy this moment for as long as it lasts because I know it's not going to last forever. So, and then using it even too when you're out with other people, and sometimes you can just be with a friend or whoever and you just feel so great when you're around them, and kind of going, yeah, like this doesn't last forever, so um how can I make it as enjoyable as possible? Um yeah, so
Mhm.
that's sort of been another great eye opener from doing this whole thing too.
Wow, super glad to hear all this. And I think the only like last question I have for you is, and I've started kind of making this my last question too. And it is like, if you could say something to yourself, like when things were really when you were struggling a lot, during those first months, what would you say to yourself?
Hmm, probably say, I know it feels like you're never gonna get out of this, and that you're probably feeling like you're just that one person that's not gonna get through insomnia, and that you're always gonna deal with it, and that you're gonna be feeling like this way forever. But you just got to you just got to know that there are options out there, and you know what tools are available to you. So you just got to put them into practice and keep trying, because this is not something that's going to resolve itself overnight. And it took you a while actually to get to this point. Like your insomnia didn't start off really horrible. It gradually got worse, and it was also gradually getting worse because you were also overthinking it. And so you just need to learn to relax and do what you need to do to relax.
Oh, this is such a nice ending here, because exactly what you said is so common. Like, so many people think like I'm that one person who will never get out of the cycle. It will be like this forever, and it's not. It just isn't. When you're willing to learn, find that courage within, and willing to see things for what they are, etc. Like, everyone will do really well, and better, and things will get easier, 100%. So yeah, I would just want to say it was super nice connecting with you, and thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks, Daniel. It was really nice to be on here and to um, be part of this series. And so I hope that there was even just a little something that might be helpful for someone that is
Um,
listening.
there absolutely will be, and yeah, stay in touch, and we'll talk soon. Okay,
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you.
bye bye now.